Hi everyone, it's Mike here from Ready Steady Strong. I've got a very exciting update today about the deadlift goals that I set at the beginning of the year. So just before the start of the year, I set myself the goal of deadlifting 200 kilos by the end of this year. I estimated at the time that this would be about a 40 kilo increase over the course of the year, so roughly 10 kilos every 3 months. With March having just finished, obviously I was due to test and see where I was, and I did test and I was able to get 172 kilos on my deadlift at the end of March. This is exactly where I need to be because I estimated I was starting the year around 160 kilo deadlift. And like I say, 40 kilos over the course of the year, that means I needed 10 kilos. 160 to 172 means I actually got 12.5 kilos in the 3 months that have just passed. This is great. I'm really happy with this. And it does also mean that my deadlift is the strongest it's ever been. I am admittedly probably a fair bit heavier than I was the last time I ever tested my deadlift. So maybe it's about proportional for now. But the foundation is laid, and for the rest of the year now, I can just keep creeping up and creeping up. Whenever I set these kinds of goals, I do put a lot of thought into the logic behind it and whether I think that goal is realistic. I spent a lot of time in my goals video at the start of the year going through why I thought it was realistic that I could do that, what my kind of background is with training, and although I am quite a bit of an older, more experienced trainer, why I still felt there was that untapped potential in my deadlift that I could get this goal. So you can go back and look at that video. I won't retread that now. But although there was some logic and some thought there, it is still quite a daunting task, especially when you put it out there on the internet to say, right, within 3 months, I have to deadlift X amount. And in the 3 months after that, I have to deadlift X amount more. So it was a daunting task and I was feeling good going into it. But whenever there's an unknown weight that you have to lift, it is always a little bit scary. I've mentioned before that I quite like to use training maxes when I train, which is where you assume you're about 5 to 10% weaker than what your tests would suggest. And then you base all of your other numbers off that number. And that means you are training a little bit below your maximum every time you train. This is good because if you go into training and you're tired or you're feeling beat up from the rest of your training, you've kind of already taken that into consideration and you're not trying to hit this number that is predicated on you being your best when, in actual fact, life happens and you're not always going to train at 100% freshness. I've always mentioned that the drawback with training maxes is that you come to the end of the program and the numbers that you possibly can do are quite a bit above the numbers that you've experienced in training. And that means that when you go to test, it can be quite daunting to put those heavier numbers on the bar. And in a lift like the deadlift, where you have to commit 100% from the very start of the pull, that can be a bit of a problem. And in fact, that is what happened here with my deadlift. I attempted 172.5 kilos once and completely failed. And you can see from the video, I was a bit out of position. I wasn't as tight as I could have been. And I didn't even really push against the weight that long before I decided it wasn't going up and I put the bar back down. But luckily, this is a mistake I've made before, and I do know this is a drawback of the way that I train. So I knew that what I had to do was kind of psych myself up a bit more, plan to commit to that pull from the very beginning and to keep pulling once I hit that sticking point. And because I did all of those things, the second time around, that weight did go up. And although it did get stuck on my thighs a little bit, I think that's more to do with just the bar bit having friction on my bare legs. I think if I had some of those kind of undershort legging type things, then it would have slid up my legs and it would have been easier to lock out than it looks here. I have experienced the similar thing with that bar friction when I've done lighter weights in training as well, so I don't think it was really down to the difficulty of the lift. I actually think I was getting ill as well. At the time I thought it was hay fever, but the days after doing that deadlift, I did have some kind of cold-like symptoms. I was very tired all the time. So I'm not going to say that I could have done more if I was healthy, because sometimes people do that when they're chasing these numbers and they're, lifting and they're getting PBs. They kind of post online, I could have done this number if I had slept an extra hour, or I could have done this number if I'd eaten my porridge oats a bit earlier or whatever. Sometimes you've got to just let all that go. You've just got to accept the lift you got on the day. But it's nice to know that I was still able to do that when I was feeling a little bit unwell. That's not to say that you should train while you're feeling unwell, and it's not to say that you should just ignore how you're feeling on the day. But I am a strong believer that if you build that consistency and that reliability into your training all the time, then when something does go a little bit wrong, you have this strong foundation of training to fall back on. It's the same thing I've always said on the day with kickboxing competition preparation. Every venue that you fight at, every tournament that you go to, the environment is different and you're never going to get everything perfect. You might take your, pre-workout carbohydrate, caffeine drink or whatever, and then you might think you've got half an hour for that to go into your system, and then you might get called up to fight a little bit early because the fighter before you gets knocked out or something like that. And sometimes you've just got to roll with those punches, excuse the pun, and go out there and perform. And because you've done the training and you've backed yourself up the whole way through your training program, that foundation is laid. And you can go through and you can put up with some mishaps in your, on the day preparation. That's a bit of an aside. I end up talking about kickboxing, but basically what it means is trust yourself, do the work in the build up, and then if something goes wrong on the day, you can still succeed. So when I set this goal at the beginning of the year, I was adamant that my deadlift training was going to remain simple. I wasn't going to go down the rabbit hole of looking at every strength program that has ever been written and, get my percentages to within 1% of being correct and do every accessory exercise under the sun. I knew that at the time I had fairly untapped potential in the deadlifts, and you can go back to that video again if you want to be reminded of my background there. But I felt like I could do just a very simple progressive overload deadlift program and get results, which obviously has paid off. Going into this next phase though, I think I am going to need to increase the amount of deadlift accessory work that I'm doing. This is because I've just spent the last 3 months getting back into the deadlift and overcoming a lot of those kind of beginner struggles where you're still learning the technique again and you're still getting back into it and feeling those heavier weights. And there's a big neurological and psychological component there where you tend to make strength gains fairly quickly because it's all fairly new. But obviously I have been lifting for over 20 years now, and I've been deadlifting consistently for the last 3 months. So I'm probably coming to a bit of a phase now where I'm going to need to be a bit more mindful in how I progress the deadlift going forward. So I'm still going to be deadlifting. I'm still going to be progressively overloading that every week. I'm still going to be using a training max, but I am going to put a bit more thought into the accessory exercises I use this time round. So I'm going to add in a block deadlift, which is where the bar is just going to be resting about 6 inches higher off the floor to usual. And I'm just going to perform a deadlift as I usually would from a dead stop. Now, the main reason that I'm doing this is to increase the amount of time I spend deadlifting, but use a variation that doesn't put as much stress on my body. So because I'm not moving the bar as far, because I'm not starting in such a deep range of motion, it's going to allow me to focus on breaking the inertia of the bar, standing up strong and getting that lockout, but I'm not going to have to do as much work to get there. So I get all of the kind of technical practice, but hopefully a bit less fatigue. I'm also going to work on loading my back a bit more. There's a bent over row variation that I'll be doing a video on in a few weeks. It's one that I saw at a Delroy McQueen seminar over a decade ago that he swore by. He's a powerlifter and weightlifter, very successful. But he talks about this bent over row variation where you basically just move your back a bit more with the movement, load the back a bit more as you go. And I'm going to use that as just some extra accessory work that, because it's a bent over row variation, isn't going to be super heavy. It's not going to really, I'm not adding like 4 heavy deadlift variations to my training block, but it is going to be something that allows me to target those specific areas a little bit more. So I can be a little bit more robust through my back. And hopefully that will help me stay more durable with my deadlifting as well. I'm still going to be squatting, still going to be bench pressing. I'm adding in some more single leg variations because my glutes do still feel like a bit of a limiting factor with my deadlift, where if I'm going to get some kind of injury or soreness, it's usually in my hips. My SI joint and my glutes have been quite sore since I deadlifted the other day. And about halfway through this block as well, I did get a bit of a glute injury, which is always the injury I get. It's like this kind of outer hip issue that kind of radiates around and stops me from hinging and stops me from deadlifting. And that put me out of action for about 2 weeks during this block. And it just goes to show that, again, these things happen. If you stay calm and you trust yourself, you can normally get yourself back into routine fairly quickly. So that's it. First milestone down, lots of lessons learned, and some plans for the next blog, but nothing too crazy. You can follow along here, and if you've got any deadlift advice for me, then feel free to add it in the comments below. I'll post another one of these check-in videos probably at the end of June, and when I do that, hopefully I'll have some more information, some more videos on my pull-ups, bench press, and squat, which were the other things I focused on in this blog. They all feel like they've been going quite well as well, but I just haven't filmed them that much. I don't really like filming in a busy gym. The only times I have been filming are on my kind of heavier deadlift sets, normally because the bar looks nice, because all the plates are blue or all the plates are red. But yes, I will film some more of that stuff. So you have more updates at the end of June. In the meantime, make sure you like and subscribe and stay tuned for all my other videos that I do. I've got lots of kind of explosive training videos coming through at the moment where I was filming some stuff for one of my athletic clients. So stay tuned for all of that. Like and subscribe, share, comment, etc. And I will see you again soon for the next video.